I'd like to give a brief introduction here, because I know I'm not who you came to see. So John Jennings is an associate professor of visual studies at SUNY Buffalo, and he teaches classes on design history, semiotics, and visual rhetoric, and the visual culture of hip-hop. His research and teaching focus on the analysis, explication, and disruption of African-American stereotypes in popular visual media. His work investigates topics of representation and authenticity, visual culture, visual literacy, social justice, and design pedagogy. He's an accomplished designer, curator, illustrator, cartoonist, and award-winning graphic novelist. John holds a BA in commercial art. Let that sink in. A minor in drawing from Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi, and an MA in art education, as well as an MFA in graphic design from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I first met John back in 2008 at a design conference where I attended his lecture entitled Adding More Black Space, Integrating African-American Visual Culture and History into the Design Pedagogy. And I've been wanting to have him come and share his research with UT ever since. So as you probably saw, there's a show across the hall that John curated for us. It's going to be up for another week. Tomorrow, John's going to be working with some advanced art students on a comics workshop that's going to focus on the theme of Afrofuturism. And what we're going to do after the workshop is somehow we're going to figure out a way to put artwork from the workshop into the gallery space. So if you see it today, come back next week and see the work that the students did. So without further ado, I introduce John Jennings.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. How are you guys doing? Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm going to try to project. I don't have a mic, but you guys can hear me. Can you hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. They shout at people. All right, so wow, I'm excited about this talk. So I always get like sleepy before I get to do a talk or something. It's really kind of funny. So I want to start off with a couple of things. First thing I want to, acknowledge, the passing of Steve Jobs, which, I mean, it's icon, so in this idea of how, Apple as a brand has changed, the face of art or face of design. And I do have my issues because I really hate planned obsolescence, and there are masses of planned obsolescence, but, so thank you, Steve Jobs. No, not from planned obsolescence. I didn't mean it like that, sorry. that was wrong, sorry, I didn't mean that like that. A couple of things I want to talk about. Well, actually, there was a couple of people I want to talk about. Leslie L.A. Banks, who just passed away very recently. I don't know if you know her work, but she did a lot of work on dark fantasy and Afrofuturist narratives. So she just passed away not too long ago. And Wayne McDuffie, who was one of the pioneers of Milestone Media, which I'll talk about later on. But he's also a really talented writer and director. He did a lot of animation stuff. If you've seen some of his stuff, Justice League Unlimited, Justice League the cartoon, he did a lot of that. Static Shock as well for WB. Very talented man who, again, left us a little bit too soon. So this particular talk is dedicated to their memory. So this idea of comics, one thing I want to talk about is some of the things that people always ask me afterwards. What's the difference between graphic novels and comics, right? And I would say length. Very much like comics is a medium, and graphic novels are just long comic books. Okay, graphic novels, that idea of is a marketing name. Okay, it's for people who don't want to read comics or they're too snooty to read comics. So it's like you're reading a comic book. It's just a really long one. That's all. Okay, that's the first thing. There's no difference, And then of course you have trade paperbacks, which are collected editions of like story arcs. All right, another thing is the medium genre thing. I just call comics a medium. When you talk about comics, what are the things you think about first? Particularly American comics. What do you think about? Superheroes. Superheroes. Thank you very much. Yeah, I love the fact it was like this echo of a smaller voice, like superheroes. Yeah. Anyway, and of course, funny animals too, right? Funny animals as well, right? Like Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck. And it's looked at as a juvenile medium, But a lot of people think about the genre of superheroes as comics, And in American comics, usually that's the case, and that's because of just people not understanding just the potential of this really brilliant, medium. So, saying that comics are just for superheroes would be like saying radio is just for soap operas, which is totally false, right? It's a medium, and it can tell any kind of story. And so, I just want to make sure that people understand that. The other thing is the chicken and the egg conundrum. What comes first, the images or the text? And it depends, actually. It depends. Because I make comics just because I want to do a guy with a samurai sword and a machine gun, Seriously. I was like, I want to just do that, And other times, the story comes first. I've adapted things, that kind of thing. So it depends, because, they work in tandem together. That's what's so powerful about the medium of comics, just as a storytelling medium. It's multimodal, it's image and text at the same time. And because of that, it's a really great teaching tool for thinking about multimedia or the way that we actually absorb information today. Because for some reason we still think that literacy is just text-based, which is not true. There's different types of literacy, and comics are really awesome for teaching just other kind of literacy. Let me see what else. I think that's it. So, basically, I want to just talk about the talk a little bit. I've never given this talk, so if I jack it up, I'm sorry. But I wanted to focus on the culture that I kind of discovered, the subculture of comics by African American artists. There's a really interesting subculture to it. As Sarah said, there's a show that actually features some of the really talented comic book artists who just happen to be black, right? And I was really blown away by the fact that I had no idea that this was happening, under everybody's nose. It's great, So, hi, I'm John Jennings. I want to tell you just a little bit about some of the stuff I do. I am a cartoonist and an illustrator and a designer. The book Black Comics, I actually did I was pretty much a trained publication designer. This is just actually this is technically a sketch. I know it sounds weird, but it looks kind of finished, but it's about this story of an African American artist who is a medium. So basically, he sees ghosts, particularly ghosts of dead black artists, and so he channels their work. And so sometimes he'll go to sleep and he'll wake up and he's done art by other black artists. And so I'm actually doing a show called Things That They Said that actually features work by this artist. Or it's almost like a meta curation of the work. And so basically I have to create 4 different styles to work in because of it. So I'm really interested in the black body as kind of a haunted space, and so that kind of speaks to that. So there's just some pieces. This is from a first attempt at the story. There's about 70 or so pages that I drew and wrote. I wrote actually a 250-page script for it. And then once I started working on it, I realized that it was too passive. It wasn't actually where I needed to go, so I just totally scrapped it. So I'm going to do the show first to figure out how this character actually moves through the story, and then I'm going to revisit it later. So I'm actually working on some other stuff. Again, I'm really interested in Afrofuturism. These are some pieces that I did for BlackSci-Fi.com and for their promotional pieces. So this idea of Afrofuturism is very fascinating to me. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but a lot of it started with Sun Ra, the kind of experimental jazz artist out of Chicago. He did this really crazy, really wonderful film called Space is the Place, Because this whole thing was if we don't have liberation on planet Earth now, then maybe space is the place for it, And I think that's really interesting. So the audacity of imagining yourself, your people in the future, is what he's kind of talking about, Because if you look at a lot of science fiction work, there aren't a lot of people of color in the old, sci-fi stuff. You had Uhura, but she really didn't have a connection. She didn't even have a first name until recently, right? Did you see the remake? She has a name now. So, but we still don't know anything about her people or where she's from, But anyway, all right. So this stuff is looking at these cybernetic kind of images. I really like the idea of the cyborg as this idea of the post-human. So it tops up my work quite a bit. These are just, I'm really into hip-hop and reappropriation as well, so these are just exercises. We used to do this exercise in undergrad where we would just kind of slap down an image and just draw outside of it, But I actually started recently doing these things too. I think they're kind of fun, That's my mom, that's my niece who's Morgan, she's 15 now.